Good day, my giveaway fans, because why not? Let's do a giveaway. To celebrate Levia and her last season with Claws, it's been a long ride, and in that ride, I myself used these alt art scabskin leathers and gambler's gloves for years until I finally got the cold foils. So I think it's time to pass them on to a lucky winners. All you have to do is leave a comment and let me know how you feel about Levia in her next chapter with Hexagore. You gonna stick with her? You gonna play Hexagore? You gonna play Meataxe? Or is she going back on the shelf? Just let me know. We'll pull a winner in about a month. Oh, I'm gonna miss these alt arts. Shout out to Sharkoroid who made these, friend of mine in Brazil. But this is pretty much Levia's last chance to play Mandible Claws. We've all seen how strong KO is, and he's gonna take these suckers with him. But that doesn't mean we can't give Levia one last shout in this meta, doing something that she does at least better than KO. So I'm pretty excited to share this deck tech, put a lot of work into playing a lot of the new heroes, but of course also Levia, and I think she plays this kind of mid-range style exceptionally well in the format and has parts in her toolkit that do give her an advantage into the meta-relevant matchups like KO, like Florian, like Verdance, and kind of Gravy. So this is still a Mandible Claws deck tech. We're of course running both of them, left and right, and then we are on Levia. Now, Levia is probably due for more dedicated support next year, but she still won at least a little bit in Super Slam, mainly due to the Vigor generation that is now available to Brute. And guys, Vigor is freaking crazy for a hero that's already trying to break turn cycle math. Now you're getting this extra resource, flattening out your cost curve, making it more efficient. It's just a really solid spot for Brutes right now. So we are going to lean into a lot of the new cards. We're going to play her as this like mid-range, leaning aggressive style deck, a lot of fun combos, and of course being pretty thematic with this build. So first thing is that you will need some tokens, of course, and if you were a patron back in last Christmas, you probably have this beautiful Marvel Plasma Fet. If you don't, the official Marvel, of course, still exists. You will need Plasma Fet Levia Consumed, still probably the coolest and best thing our deck can do. And of course, Redeemed. And honestly, Redeemed doesn't get enough love. This part of the hero is amazing, and it's the part I'm going to miss most when we finally transition into Hexagore. You just don't really get to play this side of the demi-hero, but in this build, you definitely can. Both sides are very open. Next, you're going to need Might. And let me tell you guys, if you missed out on the first Patreon drop of Might, we have a better version coming in literally just like 2 weeks. Put it on screen, editor Ethan. We've got an updated Might, an updated Agility, and for the first time, Levia themed Vigor in Cold Foil Marvel. And then the Chicken Quicken, which is still available on the Patreon as well. The $5 tier gets you all of the new tokens. The $10 tier will get you the previous wave of tokens, which does include the Quicken Chicken. So you'll need all those for sure. So I want to start this deck tech not with the equipment, but kind of talking through what makes Levia unique as a Brute right now. Because I think if you want all-out aggression, it's pretty obvious that KO is very, very strong. Old KO, of course, due to the plethora of upgrades he got in the Brute suite overall. More go again with Buck Wild, better blues, show of strength. But there is one thing that Levia does better than original KO. And actually, that's like two things. The first thing is, of course, she has double claw. So she's more effective at using these Bloodrush turns to go 3 wide without needing 2 attacks to do it. She can go claw, claw into attack, and that can keep her racing with the best of them. But then she also is just better at splicing in more ways to get value out of claws. And one of the best cards for Levia for a while now has been Tear Limb from Limb with that kind of mentality. Tear Limb from Limb is a blue, which Levia, of course, needs about a third of her deck to be. I believe this version of the deck is 21, 18, 21, to be specific. But Tear Limb from Limb in Levia has always been quite strong because she has access to higher damage on some of her base cards than other Brutes. She had Hungering Slaughter Beast to do this, and she had Swing Big. Well, now we get Show of Strength, which any Brute could use, to be fair, but since Levia's shell is already primed to wanting to use Tear Limb from Limb, Show of Strength fits right in. And I mean, we're talking turns where you can go Claw into Show of Strength. You're talking like a 4-card 19, folks, 4-card 19. is crazy. But the other thing that adding this type of card just does for Levia, this is kind of the slot that might have been Command and Conquer back in the day, is just allowing early game plays that are very solid rate. You don't want to slow down with your rate in Levia, and sometimes throwing a 2-card 6 early game just because it was like, a Beast Within that you had in hand to fill graveyard felt pretty bad. So now you've just got more ways to keep pushing. Okay, 2-card 8, let's throw this. It's decent. It means I got value in my other cards somewhere, either blocking, setting up an arsenal, and it means you're sending an 8 to the graveyard, one that is pretty strong with Shadow Realm Horror, to be fair. And of course, it comes in this beautiful extended art cold foil, so you got to put it in the deck for that alone, right? So we are running 3 of those to get started here. I think this is something that, it's tough to say in time gets shaved down to 2 ofs because there just isn't that much time left. We don't get this deck for very long before claws rotate, probably within this ProQuest season. So for now, I'm just running the 3. And I'm also running 3 Swing Big. It's the same idea. They're filling that same role, and it's just adding like more redundancy to the reasons you want to play this type of card. The other thing I didn't mention is that adding this type of very solid rate that doesn't turn off Blood Debt is not only good early game, it's also good for early Blood Rushes, where even going second, you can like claw into one of these attacks, 20 damage, and on your flip turn, where you don't actually want to turn off Blood Debt, but that doesn't mean you don't want to do anything. A lot of the times, flipping is just blocking and then passing and you flip. Well, with Show of Strength and with Swing Big, of course, that's something to look for, is the ability to still throw 8 and then flip. So we're running 3 of those. Then we're running 1 Writhing Beast Hulk, and this is kind of to play in that consumed half of what Levia can do with her power cards. She can play them straight up, but she can also flip to consumed and then use them as a toolbox. So while the Swing Bigs and Show of Strengths were not possible to be used in that toolbox state, Writhing Beast Hulk is. And so post-consumed, it is just strong to have this Dominate on demand. It is also really strong to come in for 12 Dominate at times with Tear Limb from Limb. And speaking to that, I want to specify with Tear Limb from Limb, it does double the base. So when I say that Swing Big and Show of Strength come in for 16, that's because it doubles the base of the Brute card you play. I've seen a lot of people confused. They think it gives plus discard on whatever you discarded. That's not what this does. So it will double the base of those kinds of cards. So anyway, this card, incredibly strong. Levia loves it for graveyard. You really enjoy that. These powerful blues in your deck, this enabler for your game plan anyway, also fills your graveyard plus 2 cards. That's incredibly strong. It lets you resource sink into claws, and then it has synergy in that kind of first half of the deck that we're looking at. So this next section of the deck, everyone knows and loves, or is tilted when they play against it, and that is the Bloodrush core, right? And Levia still does something unique to the other brutes with Bloodrush. And I mean, the card itself is crazy. I mean, it's kind of wild that 2 new brutes came out that are not playing it, to be fair. But with KO, with Rhinar, with Levia, obviously there is massive power behind Bloodrush. But what Levia does specifically well with this card is the other half of the synergy piece, Beast Within, has more synergy for Levia in particular. So let's just touch on Bloodrush one more time for those who are maybe not aware. Now, this card lets you discard. It gets your graveyard fill going because this will go, plus the card you discard. That's fantastic for keeping up momentum. These power cards that fill your graveyard for 2, really, really clean. Then it's going to give all your brute attacks plus 2, and it means your Mandible Claws get go again. So now you have very easy go wide pressure, 5/5 into a large attack. You can, I think more in this meta than any before, really be patient with your Blood Rushes. Set one up in Arsenal and protect these perfect hands that Blood Rush is going to unlock for you, rather than just ripping every Blood Rush you see. I think the meta slowed down a little bit, and if you just like rip every Blood Rush you see, you might not hit the ceilings of these, because of course going 4 wide before you flip consumed is very possible in Levia. You have a lot of go again on your horrors and your dreads, but you kind of got to do it more intentionally. So I think Blood Rush right now, obviously super strong. Patience is what gets you over the top with this card at the moment. Then the other power card in that combo is Beast Within. Now Beast Within, honestly, the art is kind of standing out more and more to me these days as the brute cards really feel like it's all these brutes throwing attacks. Beast Within is still just this eyeball, which you kind of gotta love. Anyway, Beast Within, not only for a lot of things Levia wants to do has redundancy in it being a yellow, it being a 6, it being a 3 block. But of course, when you discard this to Bloodrush, it's going to turn off your blood debt. It's going to let you draw another card, and it's really going to boost the power of that kind of turn, because now you could still throw a swing big, still throw a show of strength, and your blood debt is already off. Now, of course, the other part of this combo that makes Levia really, really powerful with that core is Call to the Grave. Now, Call to the Grave is effectively an extra blue 6 for Levia. It's not an extra blue 6 for the draw discard versions of Levia. Obviously, with that, you know, this is still a miss that you're going to draw off the top potentially. But for these mid-range styles of Levia, Call to the Grave legitimately just is a blue 6. And it's a little bit better than that because you get to arsenal it as well. So for these mid-game turns, potentially, where Call to the Grave is set up an arsenal, you draw up this hand that doesn't turn off blood debt, well, you can now probably scale it in a different fashion. Call to the Grave from arsenal can search out the Beast Within. Beast Within is going to guaranteed turn off blood debt. Then depending on like that card you draw, now that card can like let you throw a show strength, something like that, where you held another card just to kind of guarantee that you had resource cost, and now you have a new 6 that you can put in arsenal. I mean, this card is so stupidly powerful for Levia, and I'm so glad that it did not get banned, because actually I was getting pretty worried that Gravy Bones was maybe going to take Call to the Grave from us, which we're going to lose our claws. Please, for the love of God, can we not lose Call to the Grave? It's actually even stronger in Hexagore, to be honest. And then the last card in this little package that I want to mention is one copy of Visit the Boneyard. Of course, we've got it foil stamped from the world premiere. Now, this card is interesting. I don't love it in the deck, but it's something I'm trying in the deck. And, you know, it's got these awkward combos in a mid-range Levia. It's more obvious what the combos are in a aggressive Levia. You know, just like topping a Beast Within is really strong for these draw discard turns. But there is something to the ability to arsenal a resource effectively. You know, you get to play this out. Perhaps it's going to fix your cost curve, and then you can guarantee, oh, I'll put a horror back in my hand next turn, and kind of keep momentum going. So it's like arsenaling half of an E-pot almost. Like it's kind of weird, right? Like it's a card that's going to give you a resource exactly when you want, the Vigor token, obviously, and then putting the 6 on top, you hope doesn't mess you up in a lot of your graveyard states. You'll see in the equipment suite that you can actually be pretty proactive with your graveyard fill to hopefully not feel the downsides of how this manipulates your graveyard. But the combo specifically that you can do with this card is mostly with Bloodrush. So if you arsenal a Visit the Boneyard, just because it's kind of this do-nothing card for the early game when you draw it, when you finally have churned through a little bit of your deck, you've blocked with a Wrecker Romp, you know, you've got a Boneyard in graveyard, whatever it is, now you can more guaranteed make sure your Bloodrush works. When you draw your Bloodrush hand and you see, oh, I don't have a resource card in this hand, but I have 2 reds, you can put a Wrecker Romp, Deadwood Rumbler, like on top of the deck with Visit the Boneyard, and now you know your Bloodrush will draw you resources, which is like kind of cool. And then you can also make the choice, did you want to visit on the opponent's turn so that you can lead with Bloodrush on that Vigor token, or did you already have a blue, and that way you want to hold the visit to cast on your own turn? So you can do multiple things with it that way. The other thing that I've actually really enjoyed doing, like this is what I do the most, it actually has a combo with Beast Within and Call to the Grave, where if you Call to the Grave a Beast Within, on the Beast Within trigger, you can respond with Visit the Boneyard, and then you can almost like guarantee what Beast Within gets you, right? Like you might be calling to the grave because you need to turn off blood debt that turn, but you actually like also need to draw resources. Well, you can visit and, you know, put the resource card on top. You'll draw it off Beast Within. Or it might be the inverse, where you're calling to the grave and you're really like looking for go again. All right. Well, you can visit, put a Dread Screamer on top, and now that Beast Within will draw you the Dread Screamer. So it's hard to like draw up these hands and have them feel good, but it is easy to put Visit the Boneyard in the arsenal and have it feel good, because at worst you can just like play it out and it's a Vigor token. So it's an interesting card. It is just a one of though, because like that tax on the graveyard is not something you can always manage. At 1, it is felt pretty versatile, pretty healthy. The next chunk of cards here are just the Blood Debt suite. It's kind of tried and true. Pretty much every mid-range Levia is going to play exactly these same cards, but they're still super good. And they're kind of the cards that Levia like has built her whole identity around. Just very strong rates, barely above rate for today's Flesh and Blood, to be honest, but just very solid rate Blood deck cards that have this double playability, not only in first cycle, but of course once you hit Consumed, you can play these out again, which is absolutely unbelievable. So for that, we have max copies of Endless Maw, 2-card 9, beautiful. This is the kind of card that's actually a bit clunkier to play in the draw discard versions of Levia, because those decks generally can't craft their hands very well. You need to keep these non-blocks, whereas this deck blocks very well, and you can just always craft your hand around Endless Maw, so it's an all-star for sure. Then we've got 3 Shadow Realm Horror, same deal. This deck blocks better than your draw discard Levia, but I think both versions still use Shadow Realm Horror pretty much the same, if not the draw discard being slightly better, just because you're fueling your graveyard with very proactive 6s, whereas when you're blocking with 6s, they might not be the most proactive ones, but still, you know, you've probably blocked with a Graveling, you've probably blocked with Swing Bigs, like you can still get pretty good hits with Shadow Realm Horror and pretty controlled as well. But Shadow Realm Horror, 2 cost, you're going to banish 3. If it banishes 1/6, it gets +1. If it banishes a second one, it's going to get Go Again, which is crazy. And then if it banishes 3, you can replay. Just an absolutely insane card. And then we have Dread Screamer. So just a version of Horror, basically, that is slightly better, slightly worse, because you always get the Go Again, basically, but you don't get the ceiling of it. Still an absolute bread and butter piece of Levia. And something to note about kind of the 2 costs that we're looking at between Horror and Screamer is that with some of the Vigor generation, playing a 2 cost into Swing Big, like a 2 cost, or rather like the Dread Screamer being 2 cost into another 2 cost, right, is 4 resources. You can do that now off of a blue and a Vigor. And that's pretty crazy, because those were hands that you probably already were keeping. You know, being able to throw Dread into Swing Big, that is better than just like 2-carding a Dread rate-wise. So like you were going to keep those hands anyway. And now with some Vigor generation, you can kind of get ahead of the curve on that, and now throw effectively a 3-card 14, and that stuff is crazy. Or 3-card 15, like calm down. So that's what Vigor really is adding to the deck. It's smoothing out not only just how many resources you want to spend in your turn on the ceilings of them with resource sinks like your Mandible Claws on Tear Limbs and Blood Rushes, but also to smooth out your smaller hand curves like this. Now the next chunk of cards here is more Blood Debt goodies, and it's the 1 costs, because the 1 costs are actually very important for this deck. Definitely where Levia excels as well versus a lot of the other brutes. She has plenty of 1 costs. We're not even running them all. We're not running Diabolics, we're not running the Red Gravelings, but we are running 3 Boneyard Marauder. And this is actually one of the most important cards in this version of the deck, and you'll see in the equipment, but we're running hooves basically in every matchup. And I'm hoof-pilled like you wouldn't believe right now. And it's mainly because of those powerful 2 costs, the Show Strengths, the Swing Bigs, and then the Boneyard Marauders. The moment you see this type of hand of, oh, I've got the curve Boneyard into Swing Big, that is worth cracking hooves on, just like immediately. So Boneyard, just fantastic for that, fantastic for how it fits in your Bloodrush turns, your Tear Limb turns, your Dread Screamer turns, on and on and on. Your Howl from Beyond's right, like this card just does everything. I'd run tons of them if we could, but we can only really get away with the red because it is the 6. Then I'm running 1 red Graveling Growl. That's because this version doesn't need that many 1 costs, but it needed just a little bit of a bump, just the tiniest bit of a bump, because it felt like my Dread Screamer hands just weren't as clean as I wanted them to be. You pretty much want to be able to 3-card a Dread Screamer turn every time you see it. And the extra, 1 copy of Graveling, I really think has brought the deck there. So we're running the 1 red. Of course, the 7 base is also quite useful on like Tear Limb from Limb, like, with Call to the Grave, these types of turns. Now the Graveling can come in for 14. It's also, this extra 1 cost that even if it didn't work first cycle, now it's in Graveyard. It's going to work great with Shadow Realm Horror. It's going to work great with Consumed. It is worth it at this 1 of here. But what's definitely worth it is the 3 of yellows. You love so much about this card. Yellow Pitch can pay for those 2 cost 8s, 6 power, 3 block, just a great card. Now we've got the buttery part of the deck, the part that's going to smooth us out. And yeah, it's the yellows. Smooth as butter, yellow as butter. I think it makes sense. So the yellows in this deck are better than they've ever been, but you definitely have to consider which you want to run overall. Because the first thing, we're just not running sea legs anymore. This deck cannot support discarding sea legs. The shell of that is either way too aggressive or, you know, very dependent on Savage Feast. And I think like the reds can just go other places right now and feel better. However, the yellow's still hyper functional. You've got 2 copies of Agile Windup. Agile Windup is this instant graveyard fill, gets you a 6 in there. The agility is so good when you're ahead. It's so good early game as well, turn 0, and it's really good for enabling claws, these resource sinks. I only have it at 2 of at the moment though, and that's really because I think the dud draws in the yellow base were just a little bit too high. It's something that in the sea legs builds I was okay with, because at the end of the day, it probably meant you had like a Gold Kiss Rum for an earlier turn, and you can just kind of like push through a weird draw mid-game. However, without Gold Kiss Rum, you can't do that. So the yellow base needs to just feel a little bit more functional than filler. So Mark of the Beast is in that same vein. We're running 2 Mark of the Beast. Mark of the Beast is a balance you have to strike between how much graveyard control do you want to have and how much like graveyard relief do you want to have. Because generally, banishing is a good thing. It means you can clean up your graveyard. It means you can hit your recursion pieces, but you don't want to banish too much or else you just lose control of your graveyard. So this kind of 2-2 split of Mark of the Beast and Hungering Slaughter Beast has been my solution to that. I don't think it's right to go 3-1. I think this 2-2 split is kind of like how you want to be, because that's generally the balance that you need in Levia over your graveyard control in game. You know, Mark of the Beast is never going to go to the graveyard. It's never going to banish from the graveyard, but Slaughter Beast will. It will end up in the graveyard. It will banish from the graveyard. And then both of these being these 2 costs is just really solid for the deck. We've talked about Vigor. We've talked about Tear Limb from Limb. You know, just the yellows pitching into yellows, super strong. And then even the like Claw 2-cost curve off of Agile Windup. Now this card, which of course I have 3 of stamped from the world premiere in foil. Literally only 3 of them were opened because there were only 2 drafts at the world premiere, and only 2 drafts ever of Super Slam. I literally had my assistant, when I was doing the broadcast at the world premiere, running around checking deck lists to see who registered Vigorous Smash-Up, and then he went and like double checked that they were foil. I mean, I can't believe it. I actually ended up with 3, so shout out to all the people on the ground who helped make that happen. This card is crazy. This card is so stupid good for Levia. I had it as a sideboard card that you're like bringing out over the Agile Windups in like the aggro matchups, but it's actually so strong and your deck is like so built for it that I think I want it in every matchup. This ability to block, get your value on it being a 3, get a 6 to the graveyard, and then not only clashing for a Vigor, but it's like opting for a Vigor. You may put your revealed card on the bottom of its owner's deck. So you get an opt. And that opt alone is actually pretty strong. It just helps you get more information on your next turn, which Levia loves. It's why I was running Iva Fidia for so long, even not in like draw discard builds. Just more information about your next turn is actually a very powerful thing for Levia, because it, you know, what you're doing with your arsenal, right? If this is your first block on the turn, you've got some give and take on what card you can keep for arsenal. Knowing what it is on coming on top, or if you need a bottom, whatever, is actually like slightly more information that might help you make the correct choice, because Levia cannot make the wrong choice. You make the wrong choice, you lose the game like on your own half the table. It's terrible. So Vigorous Smash Up feels really strong. And I mean, you're a deck of a bunch of 6s, a bunch of 8s. Having it in main board feels a little bit weird into like KO, because KO is stupid meta relevant right now. He's so damn good. So that's where like maybe this shouldn't be a main board card, but I'm just running it at 3. It is so freaking good. Next, we've got 3 copies of Smashback Alehorn. As I've played Levia more and more, this has become probably my favorite blue. It is an all-star for Levia. It is a 0 cost. It is great early game. It is fantastic late game. And it is also insanely good with Doomsday. And there's a lot of games right now where you can chain like Doomsday turns back to back. Like Plasmo can stick, and agility tokens have been good with him forever. And so Smashback, yeah, just like a really smooth card for how Levia wants to play. You pretty much always want to take the risk of playing it out instead of blocking 2 with it. But, you know, the fact that it has block, sure, it can come up. But yeah, even just like playing this into a flip turn is stupid strong. And it means we get to run the full suite of Might, Agility, and Vigor on the Patreon tokens. So of course, you've got to love that. So 3 of those. Then we've got the one of Doomsday, another just amazing card. This is Levia's pretty much only true comeback mechanic. There's a lot of parts of Levia that can just go so wrong. And Doomsday is like, honestly, still one of those parts. Like you can just see it too early and then you just know you're never playing the game with it. You can have a game that is just like too fast and you flip and you just know Doomsday is like literally a no block blue coming up later. So it's not good all the time, but it is good most of the time. And it's so good that I think me more than any other Levia player, I'm going to Arsenal this card when I have like 1 blood debt. Like I just love this card. I love summoning Blasmafet. I think it's still a way to just like knowledge gap your opponent as well. When they just like ignore Blasmafet for even 1 turn, you just get miles and miles of lead from that. And it is a bit of a slower meta right now, right? So Doomsday is just always going to perform. And then 1 Soul Harvest. Can't run more. Wish you could. Soul Harvest, not super castable in a mid-range version. You're going to have pretty solid graveyard control. But in like hyper late game, you can set up these turns where like you play Howl and then you play Soul Harvest and like rebanish the Howl. And you come in for like a 4-card 15 with like Howl set up again. I mean, you can do it. It's super rare. But of course, like we're just always going to run this card. Then we've got our filler blue slots. I mean, these are our blue 6s. Wish we got more, like literally every other brute these days. But Deadwood Rumbler, really solid. The draw discard's like decent early game, decent with agility to turn on your claws. And then Wrecker Romp as a blue that blocks 3. These cards actually really important right now because we're going to get to the equipment, but we have a new arms piece, Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex. And Levia generally has a lot of turns where you're pitching yellow 6s in just because of how your curve is going to play out. But you also pitch blue 6s in, right? Like what else are you actually doing with the Deadwood Rumbler, for example? It's a null block anyway. And so there are these turns where you're like leading with these as your resource cards on a go wide with like Tear, something off curve with like Horror or Bloodrush, right? And then having just that blue pitch in your pitch zone lets you activate Gauntlet. So these cards are like better than they've ever been. They are always insane. You'll notice there is no Diabolic Offering smoothing out kind of this like quasi 6 count. And that's really because it's used up by the Visit the Boneyard slot. And I think Visit the Boneyard is slightly better, but there's a world where Diabolic just, goes in that spot, and then it's kind of got the flexibility of a blue 6 as well. Lastly, I want to talk about the main board Recursion, and that is in that same conversation about Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex. Howl from Beyond. This card is so strong as your go-to Recursion piece right now because it gives you an immediate pitch outlet to have a 6 in your pitch zone. Because Gauntlets you can't just activate, you need a 6 in your pitch zone already, so where do you get this like pitchable go again? Well, freaking Howl, are you kidding me? You just have that in your deck, you play it out from your banish zone, +3 go again. If you're pitching like one of the Deadwoods, right? It's effectively +4 on that singular card. You're turning a blue 6 into +4 on the turn cycle. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So yeah, Howl, very strong right now. And then 3 Unworldly Bellow. Now this slot generally has gone to Blue Dread Screamer in the past, and it might still technically be better as Blue Dread Screamer just because Blue Dread Screamer is an attack for your clashes, and Blue Dread Screamer says Blood Debt on it, so it's replayable on Consumed. It helps you get to 6, but I wasn't really playing out Blue Dread Screamer ever. Like I played a ton of games with this deck. I don't know, we're probably at like 50 or so. And I just was never choosing to play out Blue Dread Screamer. I think it's mostly because this deck is a little bit lower on the 1 cost. You don't have like the Savage Feast in there. You don't have that second Red Graveling Growl. So wanting to play out a Blue Dread just doesn't happen all that often. But something I really did want to do is have a decent Blood Debt curve to work with the Show of Strengths and Swing Bigs. And so Unworldly Bellow is a 1 cost, right? So now off of a blue, you can play Unworldly Bellow, into a swing big. You've now turned off Blood Debt. This is probably like a mid-game play or something. And you've still thrown a 3-card 10. Not fantastic. I mean, if you're running this in red, it would be a 3-card 12. That is fantastic. But the blue is more flexible. It still blocks 3. And importantly, and this part has come up more than anything, I think, is this is just a way to get ahead of your graveyard. Really trim your graveyard preemptively before an attack that cares about it. It's something that you don't get that much with Levia ever since they banned Art of War. Art of War was really the way that you could get 6 banishes going in a singular turn. It's been very rare to get that otherwise, unless, you know, you're hitting a banisher off of like Shadow Realm Horror, or you've got like, you know, Horror into Boneyard, Dread into Boneyard specifically. Otherwise, your turns are pretty much just banishing 3. But Unworldly Bellow can be a card that just gets you ahead of that weird graveyard. Maybe your equipment just isn't banishing. Maybe, you know, you played 2 Call to the Graves early and they've just been sitting there, you know, because there are these cards, these powerful cards that you're incentivized to play out that are not 6s, Bloodrush Bellow, Tear Limb from Limb, Call to the Grave, your equipment pieces. You don't really block with your non-6s, but the non-6s can still be there. So I actually really like the flexibility of Unworldly Bellow right now, because I think that 1 cost curve playing into the show strengths and swing bigs is quite strong. The other thing that comes up with this is because it is a 1 cost, perhaps your double banisher play is Unworldly Bellow into Boneyard Marauder. You're going to banish 6 cards, you're going to come in for a 3-card 8, not great, but actually, it can be a 3-card 9. Now you're at least on rate, because the 1 cost here means you pitch in a blue 6, you can Apex, or not Apex, sorry, you can Tyrannical Rex, then you can Boneyard. So now you've come in for a 3-card 9, you're back to on rate, not bad. So actually, yeah, this card been performing pretty well. So that was 60 cards in what I would consider almost a perfect Levia deck. Like, if I didn't have to sideboard ever, I don't think I would. That deck is really solid. It plays really well, but you do need to consider some parts of the meta. That's generally what Levia is sideboarding for. It's not because she's as flexible as other decks like, oh, I'm just going to add Sink Belows because they line up into the Dominates, blah, blah, blah. That's not how Levia can sideboard. She needs to sideboard a little bit more proactively. You know, she can't fold her own deck building to whatever's meta relevant. So sideboarding can be a little bit tricky in that. So one of the cards that perhaps is not actually correct for this version because there is no sea legs, but something we do have to run because of Gravy Bones is Blue Trade-In. Because Blue Trade-In, I really like taking it over the Unworldly Bellow into the Gravy Bones matchup. I think that's a pretty clean swap there. The Trade-In lets you clear Rigor Mortis, which is otherwise like just an absolute pain for Levia to deal with. It lets you turn on Claws as well. So now you can clear Swabby, you can clear Sawbones. And that's what you need to do into Gravy Bones. You need to not sacrifice your real damage on allies. And this effectively lets you have a turn that could clear 3 allies. I mean, you're probably pretty behind if there's 3 allies on board, but that's the intent, that's the goal. And you can even discard Beast Within to this and just be like completely plus on the turn cycle, because now you're drawing 2 cards effectively and turning off Blood Debt. So it actually comes in like slightly a few more matchups than that. You can check out the sideboard. It's all in the link below to see exactly what I'm talking about here. But yeah, we've got 3 trade-ins just because they're going to swap in 4 Gravy over the Unworldly Bellow. Then we've got our Recursion swaps. And this part of Levia I do love. I love this idea that, especially with Call to the Grave, sorry, Shadow Blasphite, but with Call to the Grave, you've got tutor ability on exactly what you need out of the turn cycle, basically. Or not that turn cycle rather, but of the game on like a more macro scale. And one of the best cards at like appreciating that is already in the main board, Howl from Beyond, but Guardian of the Shadow Realm is probably the next best example of like how on a macro level, your game plan is just infinitely better due to 1 recursion piece. So there are a lot of matchups, namely Brute right now. I would say like KO. I mean, let's be real, like KO is a crazy strong meta deck right now. Like you need a plan into KO. Your plan into KO is this card. It comes up a couple other times as well, like into Vincent, for example, but your game plan into KO is this card. And it's all because it is a Blood Debt defense reaction, which means you can play it after you flip to Consumed. This just sits in your banish zone, and then boom, you play it out. The way you drown KO in value is by consolidating as much as possible into that immediate turn cycle after you flip to Consumed. Because most likely they are waiting with like a Bloodrush or something. They're going to smack you with 5 cards. They do that more now than ever, just like 5 cards smack you back. So when you flip, you need to be able to drown them that next turn cycle specifically. And so you do that by playing out Guardian the Shadow Realm with one of your cards. Now one of your cards in hand blocks 6. Now one of your cards in hand hopefully is like playing back an Endless Maw, and then your other 2 cards are like still, you know, blocking 6. So ideally you're like on a 15, 18, you're on like a 21 point 4 card hand, like, which is better generally than like what their Bloodrush is going to be into you. And then of course, if you can flip with Husk up as well, then maybe you don't need to throw the Guardian. You can just like wait on it, because Guardian has a lot of applications as well into pulping. They play pulping, you know, you don't run D-Reacts. However, pulping has Dominate. Dominate says block 2 cards from hand. Well, Guardian of the Shadow Realm comes from Banish, not from hand. So if they like try to send a pulping for their turn, you can just block with a card and then block with Guardian, and like their pulping just dies. So Guardian, like, it's so good. You need it into KO and you win those games. Like if you find Guardian early, oh my God, like you win those games. But that matchup is so scary. Like they are so fast, and this is really like your only shot. Then into aggro matchups, Ghostly Visit just is better than Howl from Beyond. You'll see into aggro, we're also running Scab Skins. And so you generally can get away with like blocking a little bit more and then using like small hands to get ahead. You know, your swing bigs, your show strengths are really good for that early game, but then the Ghostly Visit is also really solid for the Shadow Realm Horrors, for the Dread Screamers. Now you're throwing like the 2 card 10s as well. So like small hand rate, really, really solid into aggro, because you want to block a little bit more against aggro decks so that you have life total to throw back very potent blood rushes. Because if you're like blocking, you know, this like medium rate, throwing back like a 3 card 12, aggro doesn't really care. Like they're probably outpacing you. You know, they probably threw like 16 points back in that turn cycle. So you just need to protect your life, make sure that you're still getting high value. Ghostly is good for that. And then, you know, protect your life for the best turns you're going to have, which obviously is Bloodrush. Then I put this card into like every day 0 list on Levia, and that's mainly because, you know me, like I'm playing Levia online, right? Like we're just spamming it. We're playing, unfortunately, like not as much in person. There was a gameplay video I put out against Scott, which is great. I'm going to be playing some more games with Levia as I go to Shizuoka and Hamburg, and, you know, put those videos out for you all. But in terms of like online play, there's a lot of Bolton, there's a lot of Prism. They both got new cards this set. And for that, why not? Why not run a Hungering Demigon? Come on. So that's what fleshes out the sideboard for us. After that, it is just all equipment. All right, and then for the equipment, we have a couple options in every slot, which for my OCD actually feels quite nice. I hate it when there's like, it's uneven, like there's only 1 card in the head slot. Now we've got multiple in every slot, and you know, we'll show them off basically in like premier order. So obviously the premier headpiece is Scowling Fleshbag. Funny enough, I tried Ebonfold in this build as like the always headpiece, just because if I like drew a recursion piece, I wanted to instantly change that. And it was not good enough, because there's a bunch of games where you just like open the Call of the Grave and then Ebonfold is just like trash. So no, we're on Scowling Fleshbag like 1000%. It is so good. It is stupidly good for kind of like this brute. I don't want to say like meta necessarily, because it's a little too early for that, but brute is strong. And when brute is strong, like Fleshbag is really good for them, really good into them, also really good into you, to be fair. And then great into ninjas. Katsu's looking pretty good. So yeah, just like an all around very, very good card. And it's graveyard fill, which even into like some other matchups, even like Guardian, sometimes just like blocking for the graveyard fill is really solid. You just need, it's a mid-range deck, right? Like you're not super head on graveyard from your own aggression. You're decent on graveyard because your turn cycles are like fueled on both ends, aggro and defense. And then Spoiled Skull. Spoiled Skull feels a little bit weak right now. Like you can never really use it into Florian. The games are like way too tight ever since they brought back Germinate. My God, like, yeah, Florian does not feel like a free win every time. It feels like a, you know, favored matchup, but it does not feel like a free win every time. You're just, yeah, the games just are so close. They can just open Germinate and then you're just behind like 6 points. Like stuff is crazy right now. So anyway, Spoiled Skull, the only time you're really cracking it then is into like true fatigue matchups, which, you know, some do exist. Tough Nuts, like not really fatigue as far as I can tell, but maybe a fatigue version of him is what becomes popular. Teklevossen got some support. If you see Bravo, they're like going to be on full fatigue, right? So you just take the Spoiled Skull. And then once you get Horror, Dread Screamer, Bloodrush, you can just like pop it, look for your Spoiled Skull lines. And then we've got Skullhorn. Skullhorn, I like right now into Verdance. This version of the deck can be a little bit slow to open. And if that happens, you need to just not be stupidly behind, right? And you're behind if you can't do anything about the tall arcane spells that they definitely run. So Skullhorn is just good there. And then you absolutely can pop Skullhorn. Unlike Spoiled Skull into Florian, Skullhorn into Verdance is absolutely something you can pop. Because once you're ahead into the Verdance, this is +2 Graveyard and turns on Claws. It's actually very good. On my top 4 run at the AGE last week or whatever it was, you can see my stream game into Verdance. Skullhorn was actually like the best equipment piece I ever could have brought. Like Spoiled Skull wouldn't have done jack. So yeah, there's Skullhorn. Then into the chest pieces, we've got Carrion Husk, premier chest piece, taking it in pretty much everything, and you just block with it when you get value. In all honesty, just get value with it. You don't need to hold it super long. A lot of people are smarter now about, your flip turn specifically, and they either know either half of like what you're trying to do with your flip turn. Ideally, you can flip and keep Husk up and then use Husk on the next turn. However, if you are doing that and you're like throwing a show strength, throwing a swing big, now more than ever, opponents are smart and they'll just like give you 3 cards, block 8, and then just like arsenal their 4th card. And then they just pass on their turn, right? And your Carrion Husk like did nothing. So just be aware of that kind of thing. And then on the other side of it, you generally want to protect your flip, just period, otherwise. And what that can mean is, on the turn that you're trying to flip, your opponent has built up like a 5-card play. Perhaps it's a bunch of weird breakpoints where a Carrion Husk like is only going to block 4 on that type of turn. Like let's say into Ninja, right? Like they've set up this like very awkward combo turn, and Carrion Husk is never actually blocking the full 6. Whereas like earlier in that game, they might have thrown like a Surging Strike and Carrion Husk could have blocked 5, or they threw like an E-Strike and Carrion Husk could have blocked 6. Perhaps that is actually where you need the life. So just be very aware that opponents are smarter about Carrion Husk right now. Then you've got Cloak of Darkness. Cloak of Darkness is really only like for Acilio and Kano, but it is effective Swell Void into both those heroes. It's quite good. And then we've got Apex Bonebreaker and Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex. Now, I think Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex is like actually insane. I think this card is so stupidly good. I think it makes deck building in Levia like actually quite interesting. And it also saves you from needing to run Gambler's Gloves and Scab Skins for like ultra fatigue matchups. Absolutely not. You can get away with like Hooves and Tyrannical Rex, and I think you're like net more positive on that type of win rate, to be honest, because you'll never roll a 1, right? So into the right matchups, and you'll see it all in the February link. I have all the matchups built. Tyrannical Rex is insane. You're going to get, 6 activations of this thing, let's say. It smooths out a lot of these like awkward draws where you just don't have the blue, but I drew double yellow. And you know what? I actually can use the full 4 resources by doing it just a little bit differently. And instead of like floating a resource by going like Dread into Graveling with 2 yellows, you can instead like sink that resource, and now you're kind of up the fact that you were down a resource, if that makes sense. So into many, many matchups, Gauntlets is ridiculous. And I think, Levia's whole ability with Howl from Beyond as well is what makes this just like always good for Levia. Compared to like, maybe Rhinar, you have trouble with that go again that gets a 6 into your pitch. Levia doesn't have that problem. Then there is Apex Bonebreaker though, and you'll see a lot of matchups you just like can't get away with the Howl. That's why the Ghostly's there. And into those matchups, it's a straight value game. And like I said, you block a little bit more, protect your Bloodrush plays. With that, Apex just is better, generating that might. Also the fact that into an aggro matchup, maybe you're sacking your equipment pretty proactively because you've drawn in a way where you can be more aggressive. This deck being more aggressive means you're banishing more. So the ability to just like chump your Apex and it's got its value very upfront is better than Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex, right? Like block for 5, get the might. The next time you block for 4, you get a might, and now it's immediately in your graveyard. That actually can be quite strong. Whereas like if you do Gauntlets, if you sack it that early, it definitely didn't get enough of its value. So Apex still very, very strong. And then you've got Nullrune Gloves. This is just to complement the Skullhorn. You're taking this into Verdance. I actually need to test that matchup a little bit more because I don't love losing the gloves, the arm slot right into Verdance. Tyrannical Rex is very good, but the only other spot you could fit AB1 is basically Lantern. I don't love the idea of taking Lantern into Verdance though, because you like having double claws. Like, she doesn't disrupt you on defense. So it's kind of a weird one, but you do want AB3. So I don't know, like maybe this eventually moves to Nullrune Boots, but then you're losing hooves. It's just a tough one. It's a tough one to manage because you definitely can't lose Husk. Husk is incredibly strong in Verdance. You just like maintain a brick of life. You know, every attack they throw at you, 6 gets value. So you can't lose Husk either. So anyway, if you have better ideas on like where to get the AB1 piece going into Verdance, let me know. But for right now, it's gloves. Then we've got hooves. I'm not purely a hooves deck, although I'm using hooves so much. I think hooves is very strong in most mid-rangey matchups, most matchups where it's like even close. I think hooves gets you better margin than a Scabskins. So you'll see in the matchups on February where exactly that's happening. But you know, it's a mid-range deck. Also getting this in Graveyard is pretty strong because you can get an early game play very quickly of like that Boneyard into Show of Strength, crack your hooves for that play. Now your Graveyard is exactly back to 3 because you left the Boneyard, you've got the Show of Strength, you've got the hooves in Graveyard. That can be quite strong. However, some of the aggro matchups, like I said, you're getting your value because you just keep your life a little bit higher, and Scabskins just is better for that. You know, you playing into Katsu, right? You just need more ability to block and not lose the damage race because their on-hits is what catapults the damage race. So you do have to take Scabskins. Into like Dash.io, I'm still taking Scabskins. Like the breakpoint aggro matchups, Scabskins just is better, and you will probably win off the back of like ghostly value more than you would, you know, like that one upfront hooves play. And then finally, Dance of Darkness. This is there to complement the Kano suite where you have AB3, Spell Void 4. Screw you, Kano, bro. We ain't losing to you. You also run this into Acilio, though, so you've got effectively Spell Void 4, and then you can still take Fleshbag, which is crazy, into Acilio, and then Block 2 Arms Piece, which I think is probably still better as Apex, into Acilio. All right, well, for the last part of the deck tech, how about the cards that didn't make it into the list? And first and foremost, I didn't put Cold Foil Ibophidia into the list. I really wanted to. Because owning this card is like a drug. You want to put it in everything. But I don't think it fits in this list. You know, that Visit the Boneyard is kind of where this would slot in. But I also don't think that this is a second. I think the second thing I'd put there is a Diabolic, or perhaps like break up the ratio of having Blue Dreads in the list and run like, you know, 2 Blue Dread, 2 Unworldly, something like that. So yeah, I think Ibophidia is actually like pretty low on the list of includes for that blue slot. There's just no upfront synergy with like the draw discards. You get enough of that opt benefit with Vigorous Smash Up as well, so it's just not in the deck. However, there is a Fable that I am considering for the deck right now, and it's not Cold Foil. I opened the Rainbow though, which is pretty freaking hype, so I'm gonna have to go and trade for a Cold Foil. But Authority of Ataya is actually really good for Levia. I think like not every deck should be running this card. Like, I don't think the world is ending. This is not like, oh my god, power creeping Fableds. But if you think about what Authority of Ataya is supposed to do for a deck, well, first of all, it needs to fit into a deck that pitches a blue for its damage, which like an aggro deck doesn't always do that. You know, even like ninjas have their hands where they're just not pitching a blue for that turn. It might be Hardened Crosstrap. It might just be like all 0 cost, whatever it is. But Authority of Ataya, for a deck that is aggressive, like Levia is, her numbers are crazy. Her numbers are like above turn cycle rate, and it comes off the back of pitching a blue. You're just not going to hit that ceiling if you didn't pitch a blue, right? When you do that, you are basically scaling up the effective true damage you deal in a turn cycle by making 0 cost defense reactions cost something. So let's say you're playing into Florian and you have a Tear Limb from Limb Show of Strength turn or something. You're coming in for just 16. Let's say you didn't claw. Just 16. 4 card 16. Florian can probably just like block his whole hand, and if 2 of those were D-reacts, then he blocked 14, and you only dealt 2 damage. Now, if you pitched Authority of Ataya for that type of turn, now you are still presenting a 4-card 16, but Florian's hand now can only block 10, because one of those D-reacts you have to pitch for. And so you're scaling up like the true damage that you can deal in a turn cycle, which I think for the way that Levia plays into some of these, like very defensive decks where you can't really like stop them from running D-reacts. Like they just get to play them and play them and play them. And then maybe if they drew them in like a perfect order, you just like haven't dealt enough damage to like present lethal on the exact turn you want it. Like Authority of Ataya, I think gets around that pretty well. So I haven't tested it at all in Levia, truth be told. But it's in that consideration for like, what do you do with that blue slot, right? And kind of depending on the meta as well, is whether Authority really is worth it. Like it's obviously good into Earth. It's obviously, that's Florian and Verdance for sure, but it's not good into most other things at the top. So kind of a questionable card, but I will be picking up in Cold Foil because I think you do play it in some metas. Oh, and actually, a fun fact about that, I think you have to play this card once we are a Hexagore deck. I think you have to play Authority of Ataya because holy crap, like Hexagore can have some trouble actually landing damage, like the rate can be good, but you don't necessarily like hit true damage thresholds because you don't have 3-wide Bloodrushes very often. So yeah, fun fact, I think Authority is like a must play in Hexagore. All right, we already talked about Blue Dread Screamer as to why it's like not in the deck. It's close though, close consideration. We talked a little bit about like the Sea Legs package not being in the deck. The full Sea Legs package, of course, being like more discard outlets. It can be Savage Feast, it can be like the Pulpings. I tried like a full aggro version of Levia that feels pretty good. I mean, having Vigorous Smash Up for that version of the deck is crazy. It basically like lets you block and still play aggro and gives you more information on the draw discards. However, I think that version of the deck does not beat KO. That version of the deck cannot really play into Recursion, and so you have a worse time into Earth by a little bit, and then you also just have a worse time into what I think is probably the best deck right now, which is KO, because you just can't really get Guardian working, whereas in this deck, like, you can absolutely get it there. So yeah, like this whole package just doesn't fit in this version of the deck. You can play Levia that way, but as like a last hurrah of Levia, because remember, we're assuming Claws rotates like this ProQuest season because KO is pretty close and he's at 1.5. I don't want to run an aggro Levia right now. I don't think it's their best build and it just feels like a worse KO. So unfortunately, just that's not the list. Savage Sash is similar to, those considerations. You could make room for Savage Sash, like you don't need to run the Hungering Demigon, for example, you could run the Savage Sash instead. I just don't know exactly where it's the best right now. I think into a lot of the matchups where you were like using Savage Sash to push damage ceilings, like yes, that's still possible, but Tyrannical Rex does that a little bit more controlled. Like you don't need to lose your chest slot, you still get to keep Husk. And then whenever you were like, I wish I could play this card instead of needing to pitch this card. Well, on like a more macro level, you still have outlets for that now with Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex. You don't need to like crack Savage Sash to just make like this one turn look crazy. You can get a little bit more incremental and like you'll still win those games. But Sash is still good. Sash is still good. So it's close. It's close on the list. If you want to cut Demigon for it, I think that's fine. And then Hexagore. And let me just say, like, apologies to the Hexagore fans. Actually, no, screw you guys. The Hexagore fans have been smoking something for the past couple years. However, to the people that never gave Hexagore a chance, let me talk to you for a second, because let's be real, guys. This is the last season where Levia is going to have Mandible Claws. They are not RKO's signature weapon. That's been confirmed. They are going to LL with KO. KO is stupid strong right now and has a bunch of callings and ProQuest season to rack up 1.5 LL points. Or is he at 1.0 points? I may be saying that wrong. Either way, Hexagore is the next version of Levia. And I have put a little bit of time into testing it. And I don't think it's bad. Like, a lot of things need to change in like the meta, right? Like, we need to be a bit more mid-rangey for Hexagore to be the go-to. But I think, let's say it's the current meta and you build a Levia deck. you can play a Meataxe / Hexagore hybrid list that is actually really good. Like, I'm surprised with how good it is. This is not the deck tech for that. We're going to let Levia live with claws for this one last season, and then we'll get to Hexagore. But let's not write off this card. I think I've been a little bit too mean to Hexagore, specifically to Hexagore right here in front of me. And you can see my Hexagore was getting pretty mad at me. So let's be nice to Hexagore. I think the deck is fine. Levia's not dead after claws, but she can really only play like one way after claws. And that's a bit annoying because I think she's had so many interesting builds in her lifespan up until now, leaning into mid-range, leaning into aggro. You just can't do that. Without claws, you don't have the discard outlet, the resource sinks. You don't get to, really want to play the Terral Infernals, the Pulpings, the Wild Rides. Like, they're just a bit rough. But that doesn't mean Levia's dead. So we'll get to that at some point. For now, guys, don't forget, leave a comment to be entered in for that giveaway. Tell me about your opinions on the Hexagore phase of Levia's life. We'll be drawing that pretty soon. And then also, get on that Patreon, folks. I'm picking up those brand new tokens. I'm shipping them out for just $5. If you want the Quicken, it's 10. And that is a crazy good deal. So please go ahead, support the channel. Do that. I don't paywall anything else, but I love to get you tokens for just $5. If you want to see this deck in action, I put out that video versus Scott. You guys loved that. I really appreciate that. We'll be recording more of those as I'm on this world tour in the next couple of weeks. And until then, have a good one.